Hey everybody, welcome to Doc Sports Happy Hour Show. This is a show for guys and gals who like to bet sports and all that encompasses. I'm Tony George, Master of Ceremonies, and Doc Sports since 1971 has been involved in the sports betting marketplace, and it's an exciting time right now with the legalization of sports betting exploding onto the scene right now, state by state. June 10th. New York just legalized sports wagering, and that's what we're here to talk about today, the legalization of sports wagering and what all that encompasses. And I'll tell you what, no longer is sports betting hidden by dark headlines, clouded by ugly prejudices. It is mainstream. You've seen ESPN the last couple of years with the sports ticker down below with the Las Vegas odds. It's becoming more and more mainstream. And I'll tell you what, some of the applications involved in that, are deep in terms of what and how it's going to be regulated and managed on a national level. My guest today is an expert in doing this, and his name, which needs no introduction actually, anybody who's been involved in sports betting out in Las Vegas over the last decade knows my first guest by name. Matt Holt joins us from U.S. Integrity. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you very much for the invite, and honored to be the first guest on the show.
There you go. I wouldn't have it any other way, buddy. And by the way, 7 years Chief Operating Officer, CG Technology, odds maker for 7 of the largest books in Las Vegas, and now you've ramped up to being president of U.S. Integrity, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, ladies and gentlemen. Game integrity and all that involves, Matt. And you've got to be excited right now. I know you've been in the sports betting business a long time.
Yeah, I have. I've actually, since I graduated college, I've never worked a day in another industry besides sports betting. I have a huge passion for the space, and I've been fortunate enough to build my career in this industry, and what a time to be in this industry is right now.
Yeah, and you know what a segue too. You graduate from Morehead State, you go into the Air Force. You and I are friends off the camera, and I know at one point in time, early in the years, you wanted to be an air traffic controller. What a segue into the sports betting business.
Yeah, actually, right out of high school, I went into the Air Force with the predetermined notion to be an air traffic controller, and quickly realized I didn't want to be an air traffic controller. Was fortunate enough, went back to school, got my sports marketing degree, and like I said, literally since the day I graduated college, I've never worked a day in another industry besides sports betting, and I've been fortunate enough to work with some fantastic companies and some wonderful, innovative people in the space.
Well, and it's interesting how you've advanced from now being an odds maker at 7 of the biggest books in Vegas and one of the biggest market share companies in Las Vegas to being president of U.S. Integrity. And this is the gold standard of game integrity and fraud prevention in the industry. But people are probably going to have a question about, how things are going to be regulated, how individual states are setting things up in terms of legalization and what their regulations are, and so on and so forth. But more so, you've heard for years, especially Roger Goodell from the NFL, I'm worried about the integrity of the game when it comes to sports betting. Denying the fact that maybe sports betting, especially in the NBA and Major League Baseball, maybe drives some of the ratings on those sports. And I think they've come to accept that now. The NFL probably has accepted it but doesn't admit it. But tell the folks a little bit about what is game integrity and what exactly is U.S. Integrity doing?
So game integrity is sort of an all-encompassing term in terms of fraudulent activity, either on the event side or on the sports book side as well. And, it starts with match-fixing scandals and point shaving, which is always the one that grabs all the headlines. And one of the biggest misnomers in the history of sports betting scandals that it takes millions of dollars to fix a game. If you look at all the major sports betting scandals in the United States, since 2000, Northwestern, Toledo, Tim Donaghy, San Diego University, they all have one thing in common. it was $2,000 or less that those individuals received to shave points or manipulate the outcome of events. Tim Donaghy received $2,000 per game. Adam Cuomo, the running back at Toledo, got $1,200 to fumble in a bowl game. It's not these massive amounts of money that people always think. Student athletes are exceptionally vulnerable. Officials are exceptionally vulnerable and have such a big impact on the game. But it goes beyond match fixing. Insider information is a huge, one of the biggest issues that both collegiate and professional organizations face right now. The idea of information leaving the locker room prior to public releases is a huge problem, and it's not just a problem because it invites nefarious people and activity around your program. It could be a HIPAA violation. You're releasing people's personal medical information without their consent. So there's a lot of issues with insider information, even the safety of player athletes. We've helped track down people receiving social media threats now of after they miss a shot or make a bad play. And it's an all-encompassing area, game integrity. Sports books on the other side, manipulating lines to be off-market numbers so that people could bet into off-market numbers. That's fraudulent activity. So there's just so much that goes involved in it, and we try to be price clearinghouse in the middle, right?
Right.
We just take as much real-time and archived wagering data as we can from sports books, lotteries, regulatory organizations, and look for abnormalities within it, and then look at event statistics, officiating data. We do the most robust officiating monitoring in the world, and look for abnormalities within both the events, within the wagering markets, and the correlations between the two, and try to identify things early. When you use Tim Donaghy as an example, think of how long he got away with it. Basically 2 years worth of manipulating the outcome of games. We built a officiating monitoring system that would have caught him within 10 days.
Matt Holt, U.S. Integrity, joins us. And Matt, what's the biggest misconception, I think, about betting scandals and integrity of the United States in terms of, they always said the integrity of the game. And I've maintained this, and I know you've maintained this thought process. Nobody wants a more fair game than the sports books.
Of course.
And I think people have failed to realize that over the years. Well, they're doing this, they're shading the line, they're doing this, they're doing that. I think that's the biggest misconception about Las Vegas and the sports books. Probably the best regulatory industry that was around before companies like yours popped up and they started legalizing this wagering everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. The Nevada Gaming Control Board, who I work with very closely, does an amazing job. And you think back to Arizona State and Headache Smith and what an active role the actual odds makers and sportsbook operators played in catching those involved in the Arizona State Headache Smith scandals there. So you're right. But I still think the biggest misnomer is that it takes millions of dollars to fix matches. And people always think, well, you can't buy a pro athlete because it takes millions of dollars. History has shown us $2,000 or less every major scandal in the United States since 2000. And not only that, but most of these student athletes and professional athletes, they do it for extortion reasons. You don't have to go buy a professional. If you were going to go get LeBron James to miss a free throw or intentionally have a bad quarter or blow a player prop, you wouldn't go to him and try to buy him. You would go to him with photos of something of an indiscretion. Extortion ends up happening a lot more than bribes when it comes to match fixing, game manipulation.
And what concerns, I guess, you speak with the NCAA as a whole. You also work with individual conferences within the NCAA. When you talk to sports information directors and sports athletic directors, what's their biggest concern that they relay to you when you sit down and start the discussion about game integrity with them?
Well, it's always, oh my goodness, what would happen? How do we prevent a scandal? How do we handle a scandal once information comes out? But it's also the safety and mental health of student athletes now. I mean, imagine a student athlete who has to go to a class that has 21-year-olds who can legally walk into a casino and wager on that game, and he just missed 2 key free throws at the end of the game the night prior, which blew the spread for his team. And now he walks into a class sitting with other 21-year-olds who could legally wager on that game, and he has these eyes staring on him. There's this resentment because he cost these fellow students, his fellow fans, money. And the criminal threats. As we know, fan is short for fanatic. And when you add in people's already emotional outcry for their teams as a fan, when you add in financial loss to it, you really get people who you don't know what they're going to do. So especially at the collegiate level, I mean, the mental health and safety of these student athletes now is a big concern that nobody ever talks about. They always talk about how do we stop match fixing? How do we stop officials who have such a big impact on the matches? But what about the safety and mental health of these student athletes and what they go through the night after, not covering a spread or having a disappointing effort?
Would it be safe to assume that when it comes to the NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, NBA, that those leagues, and Adam Silver from the NBA, who I know you know and have visited with numerous times, you do a lot of work with the NBA. He was a big proponent of sports betting. I thought maybe he might have needed to save the sport, actually, in my opinion. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, their concerns, and I'm assuming this, their concerns would be a lot different than an athletic director at Texas. Meaning, I don't think they're as concerned about their players as they are about the officiating. Would that be safe to assume with any pro league?
Sure.
Because they could probably affect somebody making $1 million a year, $5 million a year, $30 million a year, quarterback. They're not going to throw a game for 10 grand. They're going to throw a game for 20 grand.
But they're going to get extorted into it easily.
Well, possibly. But that being said, just for this point of discussion, is those league owners, team owners, league commissioners, are they more concerned about the officiating than the athlete, or is it a combination of both?
I think both. I think officiating is at the forefront, both at the collegiate and the professional level. I mean, look at it. It probably feels like it's more centric to the NBA and some of the professional leagues because of the Tim Donaghy scandal and the recent issues that they faced and how public the Tim Donaghy issue is. But it's just as prevalent in collegiate sports, the officiating. And I feel like the NBA does a really good job of also protecting its players. The difference is it's grown men in the professional leagues and it's student athletes in the collegiate level. And those grown men in the NBA don't have to go sit in a classroom with their fellow colleagues the next day after they blew a point spread, where the collegiate athletes do. So, I think maybe it feels like there's more focus on the athletes themselves at the collegiate level than at the professional level, but they do a great job of awareness, programs, education at the professional level too.
Matt Holt joins us here, former Chief Operating Officer, CG Technology here in Las Vegas, and President of U.S. Integrity here. Custom television channels for your business, screen content management, digital signage done right. Want to appreciate those guys. Just our sponsor today, as a matter of fact. So, folks, we appreciate you tuning in here. Don't forget, each and every week, right here, wherever you're watching this at, we're going to have a great show for you here with the Happy Hour with Doc Sports, and we're visiting with Matt Holt here. And Matt, what's the most important things that have happened for sports bettors since the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act was repealed?
So I think, first of all, it's availability of legal wagering. And I can't urge sports bettors and consumers in these states more than to use your legalized methods now. And, I understand that availability was tough before. How do people in New York and New Jersey and Ohio wager? And don't use these offshore marketplaces. Utilize the regulated marketplace where it has consumer protections in place. So just the availability to wager. All of a sudden, I can go down and I have all these great options, whether I can wager on my mobile phone or this place has better promotions. So number one would always be availability, the consumer protections around regulated sports betting. But look at the advancement of the wagering menus and regional places. So working in Nevada, we never saw lacrosse betting at a collegiate level. But suddenly, we're in the Northeast where lacrosse is very popular, and you have all these states legalized, Rhode Island, Delaware, West Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, right out of the gate, we saw this huge influx of lacrosse betting this year. Suddenly, there were some sports books in the Northeast that took hundreds of bets on the lacrosse championship, Yale versus Virginia, where people weren't even betting on lacrosse legally in the United States prior. The collegiate baseball this year, college softball, we're seeing a lot of regional biases towards sports that are popular in your area. So all of a sudden, sports you couldn't bet on legally before you can. So there's these vast wagering menus. And then the products and technology advancements in the United States post-PASPA, and we're only, 14 months post-PASPA, and already they're unbelievable. Some of the new wagering apps are amazing. The number of clicks it takes to make a bet, the number of options available on those screens, the ease of use for the customer, the technological advances, the wagering menus have expanded immensely, and then the availability for regulated, legalized wagering to people in almost every region in the United States. I think those are the three most prevalent facts in the first 15 months post-PASPA.
I think the in-game wagering, and personally doing what I do as a professional handicapper, is a huge advantage to me. And something I wanted to bring up was, when you are
Which doesn't happen without technology.
Right.
Because you can't do in-game wagering continuously throughout a game over the counter. It's just too fast.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
And out here in Vegas, I can sit at the comfort of my home and in the middle of the NBA Finals start looking at halftime lines.
Sure.
And they're going to get in the car, go sit at the sportsbook to do it. Now I know you had a lot to do with the development of the in-game wagering when you were at CG Technology.
Sure. Back in 2010, we were doing we called it in-running wagering, and it was continuous throughout the entire match. And what happens now is a lot of people use the outsourced third-party providers, but there's some really good providers built into apps to where there's constantly markets available throughout the entire match, and those things aren't. They're not readily accessible without the technology of the great apps now on your mobile device. So you have your phone up, you're watching the game, and there's even apps now where you can watch the match on your phone and have the odds overlaying on the side. It's quick, it's easy, and also the latency issues. Let's face it, when we first started doing in-play wagering back in 2008, 2009, 2010, there was still about a 30-second delay from an event happening on the court and when you actually saw it on a TV screen, and that latency now is well below 10 seconds. So things are happening almost in real time on your phone, and you're able to wager on them on a much more real-time basis.
I got a number for you, and I want to know if it surprised you or not. $2.6 billion mutual handle, state of New Jersey, the first 10 months they legalized sports betting. Did that number surprise you?
A little bit, not because of the amount of handle necessarily. It was the amount of bets they were able to take. I mean, I was really impressed at how fast and how quickly they got up and going after regulation passed. I mean, you consider that PASPA was repealed last May. Suddenly, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, West Virginia, Mississippi too, those states got up and running immediately. I mean, they were taking bets so fast. Delaware, the mayor made the first bet in the state of Delaware on the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, I'm just impressed in how quickly they got up. And considering how many states turned on right away and how few issues there were, they really did a great job of getting up and running an effective sports book without really many consumer issues right out of the gate.
So we've got we're in double digits now with states that have legalized wagering.
By the end of 2019, there should be 16, at least, maybe 17 states taking wagers in 2019.
Your thoughts on how that hits Las Vegas and the market in Las Vegas? Personally, I don't think it affects it. Las Vegas is still Las Vegas. They still want to come out here for the Super Bowl. They still want to come out here for March Madness. The ease of not having to call up Billy the bookie, and have to deal with all the shady, the dark side of sports betting when you live in New Jersey or New York now. But still, do you think this really the overall legalization of sports betting state by state sooner or later is going to have a massive effect on Las Vegas, or really not affect it that much?
Well, everybody said, a lot of people said it was going to have a massive negative effect
Right.
on Nevada last year. And I always consider it all of Nevada, not just Las Vegas. But Nevada, yet for like the 18th straight year, went up in handle in 2018. Once again, soaring through $5 billion in wagers taken in the state of Nevada. So thus far, it's just had a positive effect, if anything, as we're seeing more and more people from our region come into the state still. Las Vegas is a destination city, and people still come in. And one of the great things about Nevada that we're seeing is, a lot of the same operators that are operating in Nevada, the William Hills, the MGMs, the Caesars, these really established core brands who are also operating in states like Mississippi and West Virginia and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, they're hubbed here. So they may be operating sports books all over the country, but the hub of their operations is here, and that says something about the regulatory environment of Nevada, about the tax structure of Nevada, and about the employees and the availability of talent in Nevada, that these huge conglomerate companies are choosing to hub here in the state of Nevada.
Exactly. And you know what? One thing I did want to bring into this before we let you go, let's bring the mainstream media into this. Now, I've done radio, national radio. Back when you were at CG Technology, you sponsored my national radio show. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And you were a regular guest on that. But at the end of the day, for 19 years, and I started out with a small station, Lincoln, Nebraska, ended up in Kansas City, now I'm out here in Las Vegas, but I started out as a small regional station, and I remember I was talking about sports betting in 1998 on the radio, and they gave me a list this long of words that I could not use. And now just fast forward to today. 2 years ago, ESPN started talking about the line. They would refer to it. Brent Musburger, who now runs VSiN, always used to kind of bring up the line. Al Michaels, when he was doing Monday Night Football, he would mention it. Just, that field goal cost a lot of people a lot of money with 2 seconds left in the game.
Sure.
That was as far as it went. Now we have lines being displayed on ESPN. Started a couple years ago. 5 years ago, that would have been complete taboo. Now ESPN, Fox have daily wagering shows in prime time on their networks. You and I were privy to go out to the Meadowlands to the Bet on Sports America conference, and we got to sit down. You and I were together and listen to the president of NBC Sports talk about how they're planning on integrating, sports betting into their mainstream, broadcasts. And your thoughts on kind of how that's going to advance as states become, the more states they put on, the more I think these big major networks are going to push, trying to somehow incorporate into their shows.
Well, I think the things you touched on as far as incorporating the line and the odds into the broadcast, displaying them on their shows, is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, let's face it, the NCAA already passed or at least revoked a prior rule this year that said they couldn't hold events in states that had legalized sports betting. They changed that to allow it now.
Right.
That's a huge step. And there's betcasts now. I've been a part of several betcasts for NCAA championship game where you can watch an alternative broadcast of your sporting event. We do one here for the Las Vegas Lights. The next game will be June 22nd, giving a little shameless plug to the local professional soccer team, where during the entire match we overlay odds. We talk about how every corner kick affects the total, affects the odds during the match. That's the future. And a year from now, you'll be able to watch your NFL Monday night game. Do you want to watch your normal broadcast, or do you want to watch it in a betcast with sponsored overlaid odds that you can bet on during the match from a sports book legal in the state that you're watching it? That's sort of the future. And to even take it a step further, and not talking about what's going to happen 5 years from now, but what's happening right now, Fox just signed a deal with the Stars Group to start offering sports wagering. So you now have one of the largest media conglomerates in the entire world signing a deal with a sports book operator to start offering sports wagering on certain events. We see arenas like in New Jersey where they have laid out sections that are considered sports betting venues and areas, lounges
It's
where
like
you
a
can
smoker's lounge.
That's right, but you can go bet on the events now.
Right.
So I think, it's evolving so fast what we're seeing, and it's so amazing how far we've come in such a short period of time.
Unbelievable, especially being a radio guy for the last 20 years, being censored nonstop, and
Sure.
even crossing over into mainstream. I was one of the few guys that ever crossed over into a mainstream national network with a sports betting show, but it's because it was tamed way down. Lay the wood,
Yeah.
all these gambling, all these different words that you could not use them. And it's kind of hard to do a show about sports betting when you can't use the basic, vernacular of, what sharp guys like me and you talk about on a daily basis when we're talking about games. But
look, the ESPN of Canada, the Score, who has hundreds of millions of users for their mobile app, they just signed a deal with BetWorks, and they're going to launch a mobile sports betting application out of New Jersey using the Monmouth Racetrack license, and that will be launched prior to the start of football this year. So between Fox and the Score, you have major media conglomerates will actually be taking wagers this year, and I just think it's amazing how far it's come.
How convenient is that for Score? I talked to John Levy when we were out in the Meadowlands, who's the CEO of the whole outfit up in Canada. And he said, we're going to be an operator, and when you're checking your scores on our app, which 90% of the country has this app downloaded, you literally, as you mentioned earlier, with such ease. Oh, by the way, wonder what the halftime line is in that the Knicks and Celtics game. Oh, there's a button to hit if you want to wager it. Automatic.
Yep.
It's coming.
And the studies are there. There at this point, it's undeniable, the research that shows that there is a direct correlation between engagement, the levels of engagement between someone who doesn't make a wager or has a wager on the game. And that people are 10 times more likely to watch an event if they have a wager on it, if they're not a fan, than if they don't have a wager on it and they're not a fan. So, the studies are out there. At this point, I think it's concrete to say everyone agrees that if you have some skin in the game, you're more likely to watch the event. And this drives these huge subscription services that all these leagues have now that are also very cheap and very user-friendly. NBA League Pass, MLB passes. You pay the $9.99 a month. You're much more likely to pay the $9.99 a month if you're also wagering on the events.
Ladies and gentlemen, need I say more? Matt Holt, president of U.S. Integrity, right out here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Our first guest here on the Happy Hour show, brought to you by Doc Sports. Also want to give a shout out to my buddies Greg and Jen, Screen Content Management. Of course, digital signage done right, but they're also here producing this show for us. Our first show, sports betting. If you don't have the fever, you need to get the fever. It's coming to a state near you very soon. I'm Tony George. When it comes to sports betting, be sure and check out DocSports.com for all the latest information and tons of great content over there pertaining to everything involving the Las Vegas line. And until next week, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it.